Hello, hello, good evening,
Hi,
everyone.
everyone.
How are we doing this
Hi.
evening? Joel and Sherilyn here. We are excited to join you again for um, another conversation, a candid conversation, part two. And tonight we're going to talk about why infidelity, part two.
Hmm.
And so we're just pumped and excited to be able to get on here tonight with you. Please forgive us. We are a few minutes behind. We are actually 30 minutes late, but we had a jam packed day. But of course, we're here and we're happy to be on with you tonight. Anything you want to say before we jump into this conversation, Sharon?
Hi, guys. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys.
Oh,
That's
that was short and sweet.
it.
Well, like I mentioned up front, we're going to talk about it's a candid conversation. We're going to have this conversation or continue and pick up from where we left off last week. And we're talking about why infidelity. And there's a tons and tons of reasons why experts have found out that couples or individuals in their relationship said that they cheated or they, participated in the process of infidelity. So we are going to talk about some of those reasons. But what we want you to keep in mind is that these reasons are not necessarily the truth when it comes to deeper things. These are some of the surface things that people said that they felt that
Hmm.
caused them to make that decision or that final move
Hmm.
to 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 violate the relationship by cheating, right?
Right.
And so because of those feelings that they felt, they did it are the reasons why they gave. But we're going to talk about some deeper things that actually cause us to get to those places where we feel that way. You
You
know,
want to review the ones from last week?
absolutely. Last week we talked about four. The
Hmm.
first one is sexual incompatibility or sexual boredom,
Hmm.
right? Some folks said they felt sexually incompatible and they felt bored. The other one is feeling undesired by their partner and seeking attention or sexual desires from someone outside of their marriage to fill some type of void.
Right.
Number three was revenge or payback for their partner first doing it, which we talked about the level of immaturity that it takes to go down that road of making two wrongs be a white, right? And then lastly, we spoke about the desire for additional sexual encounters. So these are the reasons that we covered last week. And then we're going to jump into some other ones this week.
Right.
Sherilyn, one of the things that we spoke about in our own personal conversation was that one of my favorite authors, actually, John Maxwell,
Hmm.
he says that the statement that he makes is that all is well that
That begins
begins well,
well.
right? And in marriage, beginning well means really being healed, whole, and having a lot of understanding.
Hmm.
And being healed and whole and having a lot of understanding is one of the major reasons for protecting yourself that would protect you from even going down this road. And a lot of us don't begin well. And so what happens to us is that we're caught by the traps and the tricks out there
Hmm.
that will end up having us fail in our marriage, especially in this area of infidelity. Why do I say this? A lot of couples get started in the most complex relationship, which is this one, the marital
Hmm.
relationship, without getting the proper tools necessary to make a complicated relationship work. Some of the most serious commitments we make, we go to classes and we go to
Yeah.
school and then we get licensed once we pass a specific exam or test to be able to handle that specific task that we're about to undertake. But then in terms of marriages, we don't get any education.
In
We
fact,
don't get any information.
we enter into
Mm-hmm.
marriage, one of the most important relationship, most serious relationship that's responsible for carrying on the generations. We
Mm-hmm.
enter it based on emotions.
Yeah.
And we know that emotions are just chemical imbalances. You know, your emotions could be high one time, low the other time. And so when
Mm-hmm.
making the decisions with emotions on a high, that you'll be all excited. It'll always look good. There's your vision will be clouded, decision is clouded. But when you're on a low, of course, you probably will make those decisions. So a lot of us enter our marriage based on first of all, eros love, which is that lustful love, and also emotions.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk tonight about some of the things that we're going to talk about some of the issues and the reasons why people say they cheated. But then, of course, we're going to focus back on some of the real issues that we don't address that cause us to go down that road. So the fifth reason why someone said that they did cheat was because of curiosity. Ooh, I was curious and I wanted a new experience or to fulfill some sexual fetishes. This is why they said they did that, right? A new experience and to fulfill some sexual fetishes. Now, our mind begins to wander and go down a certain path because of, I believe, overexposure a lot of times.
Overexposure.
We were talking about this. I mean, why don't you touch on that?
Well, actually, when we went into the conversation, I actually wrote some things down about that, like you mentioned. Curiosity,
IKEA.
you know, curiosity, wanting to be exposed to. Sorry, let me get to it right now. Bear with me. I had so much notes on this.
Yeah. Well, you know, we have so many things that cause us to do different things.
Right. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why first of all, in a marital relationship, you don't want to be going and exposing yourself to curiosity. Curiosity shouldn't be there, but it's based on what I believe is just being exposed to certain tradition and culture. Culture, everywhere you go, you're seeing billboards of half naked people. You're seeing so many sexually explicit contents everywhere you go. In the movies, back in the days when I was watching movies, they stopped by the kissing, and then you just went to something else. But now everything is just out there, exposing and getting people so curious. And I was thinking about, I was likening it to like in Genesis when the enemy came, Satan, the serpent went and spoke to the woman Eve. That's in Genesis. I wrote it down. Genesis 3:15, where the fall of mankind happened. And this is like kind of like a fall in a relationship, or even if your person's not married yet and they're entering into this, they tend to get into fornication before fornication. That's before marriage, right? Before marriage, and they want to have multiple partners because they're curious. Is because of the same thing the serpent did with the woman. He came to her and and tried and convinced her that what God told her was not true, which is, God said, you may eat of every fruit tree in the garden, and it says in Genesis 3:15, and the Lord took the man and put him into the garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. And the Lord said, it is not good that the man should be alone, and he made him a helpmate. Now, God now realized that it wasn't good for this man to be alone, and he made him a helpmate. But the thing is, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, now us being so curious of wanting to find out what else is out there, that's an idea that is introduced into us. And that's when the serpent came and asked the woman, did God really say that you shouldn't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil? Because if God said that, he's just saying that because he knew that when you eat of the tree of good and evil, your eyes will be open, and that you'll be like God, knowing what is good and what is evil. And so she was curious to find out, oh my gosh, there's more. I want to know. So that curiosity happened right there, and it was introduced by the serpent, which was responsible for the fall of mankind. Now, sin entered the world. We're experiencing sickness. We're experiencing all kinds of stuff that God did not intend. But now we're suffering. Now, the same thing in our relationship. I believe that when we enter into a relationship, and you have this curiosity and you want to go out, it's a sure sign that the enemy is infiltrating your mind so that you can go out there and seek something else that will give death to not only you, slow death, but to your marriage. Because what happens after an infidelity, there's a lot of pain, nothing good comes out of it.
Right.
And prior to that, we don't also know that before marriage, if you have multiple partners, that you're sleeping and getting involved with so many different people. And I like when you talk about how that affects people when they sleep with many partners. What happens to that individual?
Right.
That causes them not to connect.
Well,
so
we're gonna pause and slow down for a second.
Okay.
And we're gonna take the conversation back to where you talked about the serpent speaking to Eve, right? And after that situation happened, and they ate of that fruit of that tree, what happened? Well, even before they took any kind of action, what happened was her mind was given information, right? That was false. It was absolutely false information. It was done once it happened, which is what happens in infidelity. Once it happens, and at the end of the day, this situation, JC, soul ties, and we're going to talk about that later. Once it happened, right, they knew that they made a mistake. And then, of course, shame came and they began to hide.
Right.
But what we need to talk about is, why didn't they communicate with one another when this new information that was not of God was introduced to them? Right? How come they didn't stop, shut it down, and have a personal conversation like, hey, we know that what we're being told right now is wrong. We know that this temptation that's hitting us right now to go do something and get introduced to new information and get tainted by outside stuff. We know it's not right, because we were spoken to against this. What should we do? Eve didn't say this to Adam, right? And they didn't have a discussion, and they didn't come to a conclusion that was good for them. Mainly because the information was concealed with one party, and the other party was nowhere to be found, or we don't even know where the other party was. Right? So we're left to assume where he was. So a lot of times in relationships that are not intimate, and intimacy in this sense means there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of closeness, there's a lot of respect. Mutual respect is totally high for what the other person is feeling, what they're dealing with, and what they're struggling and going through. That intimacy is not there. So they're not in a place where one or the other can come to the other one and say, hey, these are my struggles right now. This is what I'm dealing with, right? This is what I feel like doing. This is what I'd like to do. They don't have those type of discussions. And a lot of times, couples or one party in the couple is actually even ashamed of talking to their spouse about what they really want in terms of their sexual needs. Right? And because they don't have an open dialogue to talk about every aspect of their life, right? And the enemy make them feel in their mind that, you must be perverted, or something must be wrong with you. You can't talk about that with them. They would never want to work with you on this specific, fantasy dream or whatever. You got to do that outside of this relationship. When that type of a mindset is in place, and y'all don't communicate these things, this is where this happens. And so what is my point about infidelity? Infidelity is the end result. Infidelity is the very last straw that got drawn. The problem is an intimacy problem. The problem is a belief system that I cannot talk to you about certain things. I can't express myself to you, and I can't get a need met or fulfilled from you because of, whatever reason. Now, some of the reasons why one spouse may feel like they can't talk to their spouse about a specific area of their sexual need or fantasy or whatever could be very much a legitimate situation. It could be a situation where their spouse in the past had shut them down
Right.
in that area. It could be unwillingness for their spouse to participate in whatever they like. And it could be that spouse is in that position because, like we mentioned last week, they had some trauma in that area,
Right.
or maybe they have some shame in that area. Maybe they have a past or come up in a household or upbringing that says that, what you're thinking or what your thoughts are on our love life in this specific area is not a good thing. And so these are the things that need to be addressed up front. And when they're not addressed up front, you run into to troubles down the road. I mentioned up front before we started this conversation, one of my favorite quotes by Dr. John Maxwell is, "All is well that begins well." And so if we don't know one another in this specific area that we're talking about, which is like sexual needs and that type of stuff, if we don't have a clear foundation as to what are your needs in this area, do you enjoy this type of stuff? Is there shame that comes along with sex? If we, need to talk about this, is there any shame or any situations of your past that makes this conversation a difficult one? When we don't know all of that stuff, then it puts us in a position to be compromised later down the road because you're in a marriage situation. This is a reality of your marriage that is unaddressed up front. And because it's unaddressed up front, later on down the road at some point, it becomes an area of compromise for you. We like to talk about a lot of things, but when we don't talk about one or two things, we have areas that we can possibly have an open door. And your sex life is a real big deal when it comes to your marriage. So why avoid that discussion up front? That's a major issue, and that's a major area of our lives. If you're single and you're looking to get married, that's a major part of your future